Harvey Ball and the Miracle in the Subway. Prologue. A Smile in the Darkness. There are moments in history when the simplest of symbols becomes a lighthouse for millions. For Harvey Ball, a modest commercial artist from Worcester, Massachusetts, the creation of the smiley face in 1963 was hardly more than a quick sketch: two dots, a curve, and a circle. Yet what he unknowingly produced was more than a design. It was a gesture, a distillation of something profoundly human, hope embodied in a smile. But to understand the depth of such a symbol, we must ask, why do certain gestures, signs, or moments of positivity survive, echo, and transform societies? Why does one line, drawn in black ink, radiate so much warmth across decades? This is where philosophy meets history. Positivity, often dismissed as a naive outlook, reveals itself in moments of collective despair as an invisible infrastructure. When bridges of steel collapse, when walls of ideology imprison, when the cold breath of catastrophe enters daily life, what sustains human beings is rarely only food or weapons. It is meaning. It is hope. It is the stubborn belief that a tomorrow exists. This essay explores the paradoxical force of positivity, weaving the story of Harvey Ball and the broader Miracle in the Subway, a metaphor and a reality, where positivity in the most unlikely places redefines survival. It is not a fairy tale, but a documentary inquiry into what happens when human beings, trapped in apparent inevitabilities, discover the liberating strength of a single positive act. Next chapter. Harvey Ball. The accidental architect of hope, the man behind the circle. Harvey Ross Ball was not a philosopher, not a statesman, nor a prophet. He was an advertising man, a painter of commercial signs, someone who worked to please clients, not to inscribe his name into the annals of metaphysics. Yet philosophy has a peculiar tendency. It often elevates the incidental into the universal. In 1963, Ball was hired to create a simple symbol for an insurance company struggling with low morale among employees. What he delivered in less than 10 minutes was a smile. Simple, direct, almost childish in its minimalism. And yet, behind that simplicity lies an entire anthropology of human resilience. The smile is not merely a facial expression. Evolutionary psychologists tell us that it predates complex language. It is a primal sign of safety, recognition, bonding. A smile communicates, "I will not harm you." It is a social lubricant, a bridge between vulnerability and trust. When Ball drew his famous yellow circle, he unintentionally accessed this deep evolutionary memory. Philosophy of the minimal gesture philosophers from Aristotle to Camus have asked, what sustains human beings in the face of suffering? Aristotle located happiness, eudaimonia, in virtuous activity. Camus suggested that defiance in the face of absurdity grants dignity. Ball's smile, unintentionally, carried fragments of both. By placing two dots and a curve inside a circle, he created a reminder that happiness is not found in monumental achievements, but in accessible gestures. A smile can exist even in hell. A smile is not the denial of suffering, but a refusal to let suffering define the entire landscape of consciousness. The smiley as historical force. The late 20th century saw Ball's smile travel across continents. By the 1970s, it was reproduced on millions of buttons, posters, and products. In the 1990s and 2000s, it became the ancestor of the digital emoji, a language of micro-emotions transmitted across screens. But beyond its commercial success lies its philosophical resonance. Why did this symbol resonate? Because in a world increasingly defined by cold systems, bureaucracy, nuclear anxiety, technological alienation, a smile became a reminder of humanity. Where machines calculate, the smile restores. Where markets commodify, the smile rehumanizes. Ball's unassuming drawing became, in essence, a technology of hope. And it is this technology that will lead us to the miracle in the subway. Next chapter, the subway as metaphor, beneath the world, beneath ourselves, the underground condition. A subway is not just an engineering feat. It is a metaphor for the human condition. We descend underground daily, into tunnels lit by fluorescent lights, surrounded by strangers, each carrying invisible burdens. The subway is the stage of anonymity, where the individual often feels reduced to a number, a passenger, a shadow moving through machinery. In philosophy, the underground has often symbolized despair and alienation. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground speaks of the bitterness of a man isolated from society. Plato's allegory of the cave portrays prisoners who see only shadows, mistaking them for reality. The subway, then, is a modern extension of these metaphors, a place where people move without connection, trapped in schedules, alienated from meaning. The miracle in the subway. What do we mean by the miracle in the subway? Not a literal supernatural intervention, but the eruption of humanity in the most mechanical of places. It is the smile appearing where one expects only indifference. Imagine a rush hour crowd pressed together, eyes downcast, each person isolated in their own mental storm. Suddenly, someone smiles. Not the plastic grin of commerce, but an authentic, spontaneous gesture. That smile, like Harvey Ball's circle, breaks the spell. A chain reaction occurs. One face lights up, then another. The tunnel becomes less suffocating. For a brief moment, the underground transforms into a sanctuary of shared existence. Psychologists call this emotional contagion. Positivity spreads like flame. But philosophers see something deeper. A testimony that even in the most oppressive environments, the human spirit retains the ability to reconfigure reality. That, in essence, is the miracle. From symbol to act, the subway miracle is not only metaphorical. There are documented cases where a single positive act, a word, a gesture, a hand extended, prevented suicides, stopped violence, or saved lives. The very anonymity of the subway, its impersonality, amplifies the significance of such acts. In that sense, the subway becomes a laboratory of hope. It is where despair is common, but also where small positive interventions shine with maximal intensity. The smile here is not decoration, it is survival. Harvey Ball and the miracle in the subway. Next chapter, cognitive strategies of hope. From helplessness to control the mind as battlefield. History and psychology alike remind us, despair is not born only from external conditions. Two people can face the same prison, the same deprivation, and yet respond in utterly different ways. One collapses, another resists. The difference lies not solely in muscles or resources, but in cognition, in how the mind frames reality. The work of Martin Seligman, who studied learned helplessness, showed that animals and humans can internalize the belief that their actions make no difference. Once that belief crystallizes, even when escape or improvement becomes possible, the individual does not move. The bars of the cage are no longer physical, they are cognitive. Here, positive thinking is not naive optimism. It is engineering, a deliberate practice of reshaping perception so that possibility re-enters consciousness. It is, to borrow Viktor Frankl's phrase, freedom within the last of the human liberties, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. SMART goals. The architecture of direction, one of the most powerful cognitive strategies, is the deliberate structuring of goals. In the chaos of uncertainty, a clear target becomes a lifeline. The SMART framework, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, transforms abstract hopes into actionable steps. Specific, not I want to be happy, but I will write 3 pages in my journal tonight. Measurable, not I will be healthier, but I will walk 10,000 steps this week. Achievable, hope collapses when the mountain appears infinite. Micro goals restore momentum. Irrelevant, goals aligned with meaning, not imposed by external expectation, sustain far longer. Time-bound, the ticking clock sharpens resolve. Deadlines are psychological sparks. The subway miracle begins here. A commuter overwhelmed by the vastness of life's burdens chooses a micro goal. Today, I will smile at one stranger. That is SMART in its most distilled form. Gratitude, and the diary of success is another cognitive weapon against helplessness, is gratitude. Neuroscientific research shows that gratitude journaling rewires the brain's attentional systems. The amygdala, tuned for fear, can be counterbalanced by the prefrontal cortex's focus on constructive memories. That a diary of successes, no matter how small, creates a counter-narrative to despair. In concentration camps, survivors often recorded even the tiniest victories. A stolen potato, a remembered song, a shared story. These micro-successes became proof that agency was not entirely extinguished. The subway miracle, again, is echoed here. An exhausted worker, keeping a notebook where each day they list one good thing, transforms routine commutes into pilgrimages of meaning. Cognitive reframing. The philosopher's alchemy reframing is perhaps the most profoundly philosophical of cognitive strategies. It asks, what if the problem is not the situation itself, but the lens through which we view it, the train delay, not a curse, but an unexpected pocket of time to read, the crowded carriage, not suffocation, but proof of shared humanity, the oppressive tunnel, not a cage, but a metaphorical cave from which enlightenment may emerge. Reframing is not denial. It does not pretend pain is pleasure. Rather, it locates within difficulty the seed of potential meaning. Stoics such as Epictetus argued for this mental discipline. Events are not good or bad, but thinking makes them so that in this sense, Harvey Ball's smile is itself a universal reframing. It takes the blank circle, empty, meaningless, and imbues it with joy. The miracle is not in the geometry, but in the shift of interpretation. Next chapter, Social Support, the Pacesetters of Life. The Human Convoy. No individual survives alone. Even the most heroic acts of solitary defiance are, upon closer inspection, nourished by invisible networks of support. Sociologists describe this as the social convoy, the family, friends, mentors, and communities who travel with us through life, offering resources, encouragement, and identity. Hope, then, is not only an internal construct. It is relational. One smile begets another. One supportive voice can drown out 10 whispers of despair. Pacesetters in sport, pacesetters in life in elite marathons, pacesetters run alongside champions to regulate speed, shield them from wind, and maintain rhythm. Eliud Kipchoge's breaking of the 2-hour marathon barrier was not an individual achievement alone. It was orchestrated by a team who became his moving scaffolding of hope. Life imitates this structure. A mentor who says, I believe in you. A friend who listens without judgment. A colleague who shares knowledge. These are life's pacesetters, pulling us into rhythms we could not sustain alone. The miracle in the subway occurs when a stranger, without knowing, becomes a temporary pacesetter. A small kindness alters the trajectory of another's day, sometimes another's life. The mentor as lighthouse history is filled with stories of individuals who carried forward not only their own strength, but the borrowed light of their mentors. Socrates to Plato, Plato to Aristotle, Freud to Jung, Jung to countless therapists. A chain of intellectual and moral inheritance sustains the continuity of human progress. I end despair. The presence of a mentor reframes isolation as apprenticeship. The subway car filled with anonymous faces becomes less alienating when one remembers. Every face could be a teacher, every interaction a lesson. Communities as infrastructures of hope, religious congregations, civic groups, activist networks, these are collective engines of hope. They transform isolated sparks into wildfires of resilience. The civil rights movement in America, for example, was not sustained merely by individual conviction, but by the communal singing of spirituals, the shared prayers, the collective marches. Hope is easier to lose in isolation. It is exponentially harder to extinguish when nurtured by a community. The subway, again, becomes emblematic. A single traveler is overwhelmed, but when voices rise together in song or solidarity, the tunnel resounds with new meaning. Next chapter, the physiology of hope, sleep, nutrition, sport. The body as silent collaborator of the mind. When people speak of hope, they often confine the concept to the realm of spirit, thought, or belief. Yet the truth, supported by neurobiology and the lived testimonies of survivors, is that hope is not simply metaphysical. It is embodied. Our cells, hormones, and organs form the hidden infrastructure upon which optimism stands or collapses. Just as the smiley face Harvey Ball drew could not exist without the tactile resistance of paper and ink, so too our aspirations cannot sustain themselves without the quiet cooperation of the body. The physiology of hope is therefore as essential as its philosophy, sleep. The architect of emotional resilient sleep is not merely rest. it is repair. During sleep, especially in the phases of deep and REM sleep, the brain conducts nightly housekeeping, pruning synaptic connections, consolidating memory, and recalibrating emotional centers, amygdala regulation. Studies show that sleep deprivation heightens amygdala activity, making fear responses exaggerated. Without sleep, despair is amplified. With sleep, hope is stabilized, prefrontal cortex renewal. The seat of planning and optimism, the prefrontal cortex, loses efficiency under sleep debt. Dreams of the future literally collapse without dreams of the night. In concentration camps and prisons, where sleep was deliberately deprived, the erosion of hope was accelerated. Conversely, even a few hours of shared rest in safer conditions rekindled resistance. The commuter in our metaphorical subway, exhausted and sleepless, experiences the tunnel as a tomb. But with rest, that same tunnel becomes a corridor toward possibility. Sleep reframes perception. Nutrition. Feeding the biochemistry of belief what we ingest is not neutral. Nutrients become neurotransmitters, food becomes thought, tryptophan and serotonin. Diets sufficient in amino acids support serotonin production, moderating mood and enabling calm perseverance. Omega-3 fatty acids. These oils strengthen neuronal membranes, enhancing communication between brain cells. Populations consuming diets rich in fish often show lower rates of depression. Micronutrients. Iron, B vitamins, magnesium, all small but essential, act as the screws and rivets holding the machinery of resilience together. History is filled with examples of despair bred by hunger. Yet even small moments of nourishment could restore hope. A crust of bread shared in Auschwitz became more than calories. It became evidence that life could still sustain meaning. The physiology of hope requires fuel. The miracle in the subway might begin with something as simple as a banana eaten before the commute, a small chemical donation to the possibility of optimism. Thus, the physiology of hope is democratic. It is available to anyone willing to care for their body. And it is philosophical. To care for the body is to respect the vessel of meaning. Epilogue, the eternal swim. The vessel of humanity. Let us return, finally, to the image that began this meditation, the vessel of water into which the mouse is placed. For decades, this experiment has haunted psychologists and philosophers alike. It is cruel in its simplicity, yet profound in its metaphor. Life, too, is a vessel. Its walls are high, slick, and inescapable. Death waits, inevitably, at the bottom. Yet within this vessel, something extraordinary occurs. Creatures swim. They struggle, resist, and sometimes discover footholds where none should exist. Hope as the invisible ladder, the mouse that had once been rescued swims longer not because its muscles grew stronger, but because its mind contained a possibility. Salvation exists. That invisible knowledge functions like a hidden ladder, unseen yet real. Humans, across history, have built such invisible ladders again and again. Viktor Frankl in the camps, Harvey Ball with his smile, Eliud Kipchoge on the marathon track. Hope is the technology that turns slick walls into scalable surfaces. History's testimonies, wars survived not by weapons alone, but by slogans and promises. Famines endured not by bread alone, but by belief in future harvests. Personal tragedies navigated not by stoicism alone, but by the soft whispers of mentors, friends, and unseen communities. Each era offers evidence. When positive thinking is cultivated, despair is never final. The subway as universe, and so the subway, with its dark tunnels and fleeting lights, becomes our final allegory. Life is not a smooth road under open sky. It is a subterranean passage, filled with noise, delay, and uncertainty. Yet within it miracles occur. A smile passed between strangers, a song hummed in chorus, a sudden realization that the train is still moving forward. The subway miracle is not one event, but an ongoing parable. Each day we enter the vessel, each day we swim, and each day we have the chance to become, for another, the small ladder of hope. Final thesis. To swim until the end life is that vessel of water. To abandon hope is to sink immediately. To cling to hope is not to guarantee survival, but to guarantee dignity. It is to choose the struggle, to embrace the motion, to say with every breath, I will swim. Until the very end, I will swim. This is the eternal swim of humanity. In it we find not certainty of rescue, but the certainty of meaning. And in that certainty, paradoxically, lies our salvation, next chapter. The fragility and power of hope. Hope is the most paradoxical of human forces. Delicate as a soap bubble, yet capable of carrying the weight of entire civilizations. It does not roar like artillery, nor does it dazzle like fireworks. Often it begins in whispers, in the glance of a stranger, in the fragile warmth of a smile. And yet, when it collapses, it can take down the strongest muscles, the keenest minds, the most elaborate institutions. History has shown, time and again, that when optimism falters, entire communities sink into learned helplessness. Psychologists such as Martin Seligman demonstrated it in controlled laboratories, where dogs subjected to unavoidable shocks eventually ceased to try escaping, even when escape was possible. They learned despair. And what is true in the sterile corridors of science is magnified 1,000-fold in the lived history of nations. Prisoners of war who gave up hope often withered within days, while those who clung to some shard of meaning, a memory of family, a vision of freedom, a stubborn inner vow, survived the unthinkable. Hope does not guarantee victory, but its absence guarantees defeat. And yet, what rekindles this fragile flame? Not monumental declarations, not always grand revolutions. Often it is something so small it appears trivial. A crust of bread shared in a camp, a secret message scrawled on a wall, a yellow circle with 2 dots and a curved line. The smile, that universal shorthand of goodwill, may seem inconsequential, but it rewires the nervous system, softens the amygdala's alarms, and whispers to the prefrontal cortex, the world is not wholly hostile. There is still reason to act. A single act of kindness can cascade across a community like a viral spark, reconfiguring what seemed immovable. This is the true duality of hope. It collapses easily, yet it can be reborn from the smallest seed. A match may be extinguished by wind, but it may also ignite a forest. Next chapter, Engineering Optimism. Lessons from Harvey Ball for today. Harvey Ball, the unassuming artist who drew the first smiley face for a small insurance company in Worcester, Massachusetts, could not have known he was creating one of the most enduring symbols of optimism in modern history. For him, it was a job. A few lines and a circle drawn in less than 10 minutes. Yet sometimes the simplest designs contain the deepest resonances. The smiley became more than an image. It became a tool, a portable talisman of lightness in an often grim, industrial world. In that sense, Ball was not just an artist. He was an engineer of optimism. He demonstrated that hope can be built, distributed, and multiplied if one understands the mechanics of human psychology. What are those mechanics today? How do we engineer optimism in our fractured digital age? Personal strategies. The first battlefield is within the self. Setting clear goals, smart goals, psychologists remind us, transforms vague yearning into structured pathways. Gratitude practices retrain the mind to notice abundance rather than lack. Cognitive reframing shifts the narrative from I failed to I learned. These are not tricks of denial, but conscious acts of neural resculpting, strengthening the brain's pathways of resilience. Social strategies. No individual is an island. The theory of the social convoy suggests that humans move through life in groups that carry and protect them. Mentors, friends, partners, these are the pace setters of our existence. Like the marathoners who shield Eliud Kipchoge from wind resistance, our companions make the impossible sustainable. Engineering optimism thus requires cultivating these circles intentionally, choosing relationships that amplify rather than extinguish hope, political strategies. At the macro level, optimism becomes policy. Leaders who declare, like MacArthur, I shall return, or like Kennedy, we choose to go to the moon, do more than set objectives. They alter the psychological climate of entire nations. Today, in an age of pandemics, climate crises, and disinformation, the engineering of hope is a civic duty. Public narratives matter. To remind populations that the tunnel, however long, has an exit is as vital as food and infrastructure. From the miracle in the subway, where strangers saved one another not out of obligation, but out of a sudden eruption of collective faith in humanity, to the viral spread of memes that offer lightheartedness in the darkest news cycles, we see the same pattern. Hope is contagious, but it requires carriers. Harvey Ball gave us one such virus. A simple smile that leapt borders, transcended languages, and embedded itself in our neural and cultural DNA. Next chapter epilogue, the eternal subway. Imagine life as a subway ride. The car is crowded, the air heavy, the windows smeared. You do not always know the schedule. Sometimes the train halts in tunnels, sometimes it hurtles forward without explanation. Strangers surround you, each locked in their private worlds of worry, ambition, fatigue. There are moments when the journey feels unbearable. The tunnel stretches endlessly and no light glimmers ahead. You begin to suspect you will never emerge, that you are entombed in motion without destination. This is despair, the conviction that the darkness is infinite. But then, sometimes faintly, sometimes brightly, a signal arrives. A smile from a stranger, a child's laughter echoing in the compartment, a scrap of music played by a busker at the next station. Suddenly, the darkness shifts. It has not vanished, but it is no longer absolute. There is a reminder. The train is moving. The tunnel has an end. Positive thinking is not about denying the darkness of the subway. It is about carrying a candle within it. It is the discipline of saying, even if I cannot see the station yet, I know it is there. It is the art of finding light not only in destinations, but in the ride itself. In the faces beside us, in the solidarity of strangers, the eternal subway of life does not promise comfort. It promises motion, uncertainty, and the inevitability of tunnels. But if we cultivate hope, engineered through symbols, practices, communities, then every ride contains meaning. The train becomes not a prison, but a pilgrimage. And perhaps that is the final gift of Harvey Ball and the miracle stories that echo his ethos, to remind us that no matter how deep the tunnel, a smile can be the light that keeps us moving forward.